Okay, everyone. Shavua Tov, Good Vach, Shabbos, Motzaei Shabbos Truma, Shabbos Nevarchim Adar, Shabbos Shkalim. So maybe we'll actually be able to get in two short stories of the Baal Shem Tov. After one of them, I told over Friday night, my daughter was like, "So what's the lesson?" And I thought maybe I should say another story, just in case not everyone gets a lesson. So the first story is like this. There was a chassid, his name was Reb David. And this Reb David was a well-known Talmud Chacham, Torah scholar, recognized by many to be a Torah scholar. And he once met a close friend of his after he became a student of the Baal Shem Tov. And he told the student, this friend told him, "So what was it that made you become a student of the Baal Shem Tov?" His friend at that point was not a student. So he said, "Well, I'll tell you, I heard so many things about the Holy Baal Shem Tov, and I decided to travel and see for myself. So I come to the city of Mezhebush, which is the city of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, and I see that the Baal Shem Tov is davening and really it's inspiring and it's mamish, it's beautiful. Every word is like a gem. But it still didn't capture my soul. It didn't capture me. So I figured I was going to go back to my city. He was a Rav. And, he saw the Baal Shem Tov. He's very holy, very special. He didn't capture it. So the student said, wait, there's going to be an event. The Baal Shem Tov is going to be having a special event where he gives over Dvar Torah. Maybe that's where you should really, see the Baal Shem Tov when he's giving over his Torah studies. So he said, fine, I'll wait. And he waited a day or two, and he was there, but Baal Shem Tov was giving over a great Torah idea, and he says it was amazing. Also, like the prayer, every word is a gem. But he said it still didn't capture me. So they said to him, he said, well, if you wait one more day, the students told him, is the yahrzeit of his father. And on the yahrzeit of his father, he's very elevated, and he says the whole Mishnah is by heart in his room. If you could see that, I'm sure it's going to capture you. So he said, okay, he stayed, and they organized it so that he should be hidden in the room of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov was walking back and forth and saying the whole Mishnayos, and it was awesome to see. But he said it still didn't capture him. So he said, okay, just wait till tomorrow night, after the finishing of the yahrzeit. The Baal Shem Tov fasts on his father's yahrzeit, and he invites a small group of students to celebrate the Motzaei, the night and finishing the yahrzeit, and you'll come and you'll spend time with the Baal Shem Tov then, and I'm 100% sure. He said that's when he will capture you. So he said, okay, fine, beautiful, but they told him you have to. For some reason, most people who attend this gathering, a lot of them fall asleep, and the Baal Shem Tov doesn't want you to fall asleep, and you don't want to miss it. So you better try very hard not to fall asleep. So this Reb David got a good night's rest, and he obviously did took coffee and other things that would help him stay up. And it comes to this meal, and the Baal Shem Tov starts to say a Torah at the meal about the kavanos, the Baal Shem Tov's kavanos of what does it mean, what are you supposed to think when you go to the mikvah. And he's talking, and his face is fire. And one of the students say, but Rebbe, doesn't the holy Arizal say differently? So the Baal Shem Tov looks at him, and he starts to say it again. And the Baal Shem Tov continues again to say the kavanas of the mikvah. And the students again ask, Rebbe, isn't this not exactly this? Doesn't the Arizal Kodesh say differently? The Arizal, the author of the Kisvei Arizal and the father of modern Kabbalah from 500 years ago. So this Reb David is listening, and all of a sudden he becomes extremely tired. And as much as he tries, and as much as he's trying to stay up, he can't control it, and he falls asleep. In his sleep, he has a vision, and he sees people running, and they say, "Where are you running to?" So he says, "Don't you know? There's going to be a discussion up of the Baal Shem Tov and the Arizal. We all want to hear the discussion of the Baal Shem Tov and the Arizal." So he runs along with them, and they come to this big space, and there's two big chairs, like they would have a debate. And sitting on the chair comes the Baal Shem Tov, and the second chair comes the Arizal. And the Baal Shem Tov starts to expand on his ideas of what are the kavanas, what are the intentions a person's supposed to have when they go to the mikvah, to immerse themselves in the waters of purity. And the Arizal challenges the Baal Shem Tov, and he says, no, the kavanas are differently. And the Arizal says the kavanas the way he taught them. And they're discussing back and forth. And finally, after long discussion, the Arizal agrees with the Baal Shem Tov that the Baal Shem Tov is right for his times. These are the kavanas, that the Baal Shem Tov's kavanas are the ones that he's supposed to have one is supposed to have when you go to the mikvah. And then this student of David wakes up, and he's at the table, and he sees the Baal Shem Tov, his face is white, his eyes are closed. And then the Baal Shem Tov opens his eyes, and he starts again to teach the kavanas, the intentions of what a person's supposed to have when they go to the mikvah. And again, for the third time, the student on the side says, but Rebbe, doesn't the Arizal teach differently? And at that point, the Baal Shem Tov turns to Reb David and says, David, stand up and testify what you saw. That Arizal concurred and agreed to the shita of the Baal Shem Tov for the kavanas of the mikvah. And he told this Reb David afterwards told his friend, and that's when the Baal Shem Tov captured me. And incidentally, the friend also became a chassid, who was the great-grandfather of the famous Chabad chassid, Reb Hillel Aparich. I showed other story, second story, just to tell Motzaei Shabbos. It's you can never tell too many stories of the Baal Shem Tov. So I just saw in a Sifri Chassidim from Rabbi Zevin. He says that there was something that we can maybe apply to our day-to-day lives. So there was a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov who was davening with the rest of the chassidim with the Baal Shem Tov on Rosh Hashanah. And during the Rosh Hashanah davening, one of his colleagues bent down and his shmek tabak, his tabak spice that people sometimes use to sniff, his snuff fell out of his pocket, and he bent down to go get it. And when he was doing that, the colleague was watching how his friend is bending down during the davening to pick up the snuff, and he thought it was inappropriate. And he had what's called a kapeda. He had hard feelings. He thought it wasn't right for someone studying, a high student, a Torah scholar, davening by Rosh Hashanah, by the Baal Shem Tov, should be preoccupied in his snuff. At that moment, there was a big zera, a big decree in heaven on this student who picked up the snuff because the other student had hard feelings and thought it was wrong. And the Baal Shem Tov, in his Ruach HaKodesh, in his divine spirit, right away recognizes what's going on. And he's trying as hard as he can to nullify the decree. And all the pleas and the tries and the arguments of the Baal Shem Tov in heaven won't help the second student who picked up the snuff, because the first student had hard feelings about it, thought it was inappropriate. So the Baal Shem Tov, throughout the days of Tshuva, tried and nothing helped. Yom Kippur, he tried, nothing helped. Finally, before Hoshana Rabbah, which is the end, or almost the end of the chasima, of the signing of a person's new year, the Baal Shem Tov was finally told in heaven that the heaven will agree only if the student that had a kapeda, the student that had hard feelings, himself will agree that it wasn't such a severe thing, and then we can nullify the decree. So on that night of Hoshana Rabbah, the Baal Shem Tov walks into the Beis Medrash, and he sees this student who had a hard feeling trying to say the tikkun. Tikkun is what we say the night of Hoshana Rabbah, is the special prayers and studying and Tehillim that we say to give ourselves a good year. And the Baal Shem Tov took away his mind, means he wasn't able to concentrate. And so not able to concentrate, and he couldn't say the tikkun, so his mind started to wonder, and he started to think, why is it that there's snuff in the world? Why is it that lately there's become a new thing of these grasses and tobaccos that people use for snuff and for smoking? What's that? Why was this introduced? And he thought to himself, maybe because there's certain tzaddikim, certain souls, that the only way they could connect is through the high sensitivity of smell. Because we know smell is a very delicate sense, much more delicate than feeling or tasting. So certain souls need to connect through the sensitivity of smell. And then he started to think, maybe I was wrong to have hard feelings about this student who had snuff. Maybe through his snuff, he was helping certain people get their elevations. And he regretted his feelings. The next morning, the Baal Shem Tov had a custom, everyone would come by and say, ask for blessings or ask questions. So when this student came by, he asked the Baal Shem Tov about what's the reason of the snuff. So the Baal Shem Tov says, what do you think? So he told him that he thinks maybe it's to help the delicate souls. The Baal Shem Tov says, tell me the whole story. And he told him the whole story, how his friend dropped the snuff and he had hard feelings. And then he started to think that maybe it's not so bad because through smell you could help other people. And the Baal Shem Tov then told him, he said, you should know that when you had feelings for this person of judgment, you're feeling judgment, judging this person, you should know that there was a big judgment in heaven. And taught him that you have to be very careful, even on holy things, you have to be very careful to judge, not to judge another person, chas v'shalom, because you never know, A, what the person's going through, and B, you never know, not everyone is aware of what is considered a service and what is considered a waste of time. Sometimes what may seem like a waste of time or petty is actually a way of serving Hashem. Right? So thank you all for joining for the story. Thank you, Judith, for the inspiration of the story. And let's bring up the halachos of Shabbos. Hold on. Sorry, the halachos of Tefillah. Okay, so we're holding the laws of Tefillah, chapter 17, the laws of Shema. So we're holding law number 6. The Kitzur says, "Hakoyre Krias Shema." When one reads the Shema, lo yirmaz be'einav, you may not signal with your eyes, even signaling with your eyes, which seems to be not such a direct action. V'lo yikroitz b'sfasav, nor move your lips also. V'lo yareb etzba'osav, don't point with your finger. Ach l'tzorich mitzvah, but he's the Kitzur says, Judith asked what's the lesson of the first story. That's what my daughter asked. That's why I said a second story. Okay, so I'm not sure. I'm sure the lesson is about this, about the kavanas hamikvah. But that's a good question. When I said the story at the table, my daughter Sarah was like, "So Abba, what did you learn from the story?" And I thought, maybe I should also prepare a second story. But let's all think about that. And don't point with your finger. But for the sake of a mitzvah, in the second part of the Shema, meaning not the first part of the Shema, meaning from until uvi sharecha v'hafta, that you shouldn't make any, but for a mitzvah, the second part you make. Let's see the footnotes. Number 16, for the purpose of communicating with someone. Obviously, if someone has, if someone's eyes are blinking or blinks more or what have you, that's obviously not talking about a person who's trying to signal. But if you're talking about it for a purpose of communication, don't signal with your eyes or your fingers or your lips. For the purpose of communicating with someone, again, with your fingers. But the point over here is the concentration on the saying the Shema and not to try to communicate to others by pointing. A person may say, well, I'm not talking, I'm pointing. But you shouldn't even point during the Shema. We, of course, know what we learned from our from Yaakov Avinu, who didn't even respond to his son Yosef, who he didn't see in so many years, because he was saying the Shema. Okay, okay, at some point I had a picture, and I don't know where it is, but there's a question: is how do we hold our tzitzis for the men in the class? So we have koidim Krias Shema before we say the Shema. Kshoimer Vavienu. Vavienu is towards the end of Avos Olam, or some would say Ava Rabba. And Vavienu, we say v'noites hatzitzis biyadai. You take the tzitzis in your hand, and the way we take the tzitzis is front right, front left, back right, and then you gather all four together. So we do is you put the tzitzis, I had a picture before, you put the tzitzis between the front and back finger, and you're holding it with your thumb, right? So like this. So you hold it by the heart. So you hold up the tzitzis by the heart for the first two of the three parts of the Shema, because we don't kiss the tzitzis until the third part, which is the Vayomer. When you get to Vayomer, which is the third part of the Shema, where we kiss the tzitzis 4 times of the tzitzis and the emes. So shehi parshas tzitzis, but that is the portion of tzitzis. Oifsam gam biyamin. The word here is gam, also on the right. So you don't let go of what you're holding in your left hand, but now you also hold the remainder of the tzitzis in your right hand. Ukshayim re'isam oisai, noistam alaynayim, umistaklim v'noishkan. When you say re'isam oisam, you look at them, re'isam, umistaklim v'noishkan, and you kiss them. V'noigin shebachol pam sha'im meteva tzitzis, noishkan. Every time we say the word tzitzis, we kiss the tzitzis. V'ofsan ad v'nachmodim la'ad, and we continue to hold the tzitzis until the end of Vayatziv. Sha'az noishkan manicham biyadeh, then you kiss them the final time. 2 times we kiss it in Vayatziv, and then you could release the tzitzis. So you're holding the tzitzis from V'havienu, which is the end of the bracha, the final bracha before Shema, in your left hand. When you get to Vayomer, you also grab with your right hand, and that's going to be the moving hand to move it for the kissing, etc. Let's see if there are any footnotes, and if there are not, no footnotes on this one. Okay. Okay, now this is something we pay attention to. When we say Ani Hashem Elokeichem, Yemer Miyad Es Tevais Emes. So let's just bring the siddur in front of us. So the siddur we say like this: the final verse of the Vayomer is Ani Hashem Elokeichem, Asher Haitzesi Eschem Mieretz Mitzrayim Liyos Lachem Leloikim. And then it says Ani Hashem Elohechem, and then that's the end of the pasuk. We add to that right away. We say the word emes. Ani Hashem Elohechem. We say emes. Shlei lahafzik beineim. We shouldn't separate from Ani Hashem Elohechem to the word emes. V'gam hashliach tzibur omer kein v'chayzer v'omer Hashem Elohechem emes. The chazan also adds, when he completes it loudly to lead the congregation, he says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes. V'yichaven kol echad lishmoya gimel tevis elu mipi hashliach tzibur, and make sure to listen when the chazan says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes. Sorry, we don't say the word Ani. The chazan says Hashem Elokeichem Emes. The 3 words Hashem Elokeichem Emes. So you should listen. Pay attention when the Shliach Tzibur, when the Chazan says Hashem Elokeichem Emes, these 3 words, because then it's Nishlamu Ramach Tevis B'Krias Shema, then together with the additional 3 words Elokeichem Emes, we make up 248 words of the Shema, which correspond to the 248 limbs of a person, the 248 mitzvahs. Shekineged Ramach Evam Shbadam. Doesn't mention the mitzvahs, but the 248 limbs of the person are corresponding to the 248 positive commandments. And after the Chazan says Hashem Elokeichem Emes, we say the Vayativ. But you can't say, we don't say, it's forbidden to say 2 times Emes. So there's different customs about this. Let's see the footnotes. If you're not davening with the Chazan, so you're not going to hear the Chazan say Hashem Elokeichem Emes, which would add to make up the 248 words, because you're davening alone, and by you just saying Hashem Elokeichem Emes, you're still shy 3 words. So what do to have the 248 words, which is important? So you should say before the Shema, Melech Memon. By adding those 3 words, you have the 248 words, which are the 248 limbs, 248 mitzvahs. To add up to the 48 words of the Shema. Footnote, because that's not everyone's custom. Okay. Footnote number 18 is we should immediately add the word emes without interruption. There must be no pause between the words Elokeichem and emes, right? We say Ani Hashem Elokeichem, we have to go right away and say emes, even though Elokeichem is the concluding word of the Shema, right? So like we said before, the actual word Elokeichem is the last word of the Shema. We right away say the word emes. Emes means truth. 19. So he says, because when praying privately, you do not hear the chazan repetition, and so these 3 words must be added to make up the 248 words, right? So because we don't have a chazan if you're davening alone, so if you don't have a chazan and you're davening alone, so then you would add the 3 words of Kel Melech Neman. Okay. Let's just leave it at that. Let's continue. In hifsik be'emsa Krias Shema, if someone interrupts the middle of the Shema, min Shema Yisrael ad al ha'oretz. So he says, what does it mean in the middle of Shema? Until that means in the first two parshas, a person makes an interruption. Machmas ayin is not by choice, but it was by force or by mistake. It was something that was out of your control. For whatever reason, you had to make a hefsek. You had to make an interruption. What happens if all of a sudden you immediately needed to go to the bathroom and you couldn't wait? Or you found something tsoya, which is excrement in your place where you were davening. If the interruption was so long that you could have said the whole Shema in that time that you were interrupted, and you were in the middle. You have to start from the beginning. Meaning to say, if you make an interruption, it's not important even if it's an onus, even if it was done by mistake. It means you had no choice. You had to make the interruption. So now that you've made the interruption, if the interruption was in a period of time, you went to the restroom, let's say, in the amount of time it would say to take the Shema, and you come out of the restroom, now you have to say the Shema again from the beginning. He says in footnote number 20, this is measured by the reader himself and not by the time it takes the average person to read. Okay, so this is a question obviously everyone's going to ask is, how long is this time? So in the footnote he says, each person has to know themselves. You'd say Shema daily, so you would have an idea how long it takes you to say the Shema. That's how long if the interruption is considered an interruption. It means it's not. It doesn't go by the average and doesn't go by what most people do. It goes by what you do. If it takes you 10 minutes to say the Shema, then 10 minutes would be the interruption. If it takes you 3 minutes to say the Shema, then 3 minutes would be the interruption. You say it from the beginning. Footnote number 21. The Shema must be repeated in this case because the person or place was not fit for reciting the Shema. But if one is forced to interrupt his reading because of robbers, etc., he would not be required to repeat the Shema, so says the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah makes the difference if the interruption was because you were in a place that you couldn't say the Shema, i.e. there was something inappropriate in the space that you were in, or you were in the bathroom, so then you couldn't say the Shema. Both those cases, you couldn't say the Shema. It means if it took you 10 minutes to get out of a space where there was soa, there was excrement in the room, or you were 10 minutes in the bathroom, in both those cases, at that point, you could not say the Shema. So the interruption was a place that it was forbidden for you to say Shema. Then, after the time passes, you have to say the Shema. But the Mishnah Berurah says, but if the oinus, again, oinus means it wasn't by choice. It was out of your control. For instance, robbers, thugs, whatever. You interact people that cause you out of your control to interrupt the Shema. So then the Mishnah Berurah says, even if it takes whatever that interruption is, or whatever the reason was, but if it was out of your control and it took longer than it would take you to say the Shema, you don't start from the beginning. It's about the place, not so much the time. It's the place and time together versus just the time. Okay. Kara Krias Shema v'nichnas l'beis hakneses u'matza tzibur shekorin Krias Shema. If you had already read the Shema and you enter the synagogue, and in the synagogue you come in and they're saying the Shema. Tzarech likroisi mohim kol Krias Shema. So notwithstanding for the fact that you've already read the Shema yourself privately, if the minyan is saying Shema, you read with them the entire Shema. So it shouldn't look, this is how careful we are, that because the Shema is accepting the yoke of heaven, Kabbalah's all, you're accepting God's kingship, by walking into the shul and being quiet, while the rest of the congregation is saying this. By the way, this happens all the time, especially if you're walking into shuls that are in, that have like minyan factories that are going, right? They have the minyanim, going all the time. So that's the question, is that there's different psakim if you're Pasha in a shul, let's say someone was in 770, you could have 15, 20 minyanim going on at one time in the big room. And a lot of big shuls are like that. So, a person you can't walk 5 feet. Everywhere you walk is going to be another Shema, another Kedusha, another reason that means how much could you cut yourself off from a minyan that's happening around you? So that you have to ask your local rabbi. There's different psukim about that, but rulings about that. But if in general you walk into shul, you already said the Shema, and the congregation is saying the Shema, by not saying the Shema, it's as if you're not agreeing to what they're saying. And because the Shema is such a essential prayer, which is accepting God's kingship, it's very important that you don't give off the impression that you don't agree to accept God's kingship. So what does it mean? You already prayed. So what do you have to say? So it's considered as if you learned Torah. It's like as if you read Torah. Okay, so don't feel like you're wasting your time, God forbid. Get reward. As if you read Torah. Yes, Rebecca.
But if someone already said Shema, then isn't it like repeating Hashem's name in vain?
That's why he says it's considered as if you're learning Torah Shebuksav. We're talking about a person who said Shema at home. Let's say you. Some people want to come to the shul for, let's say, Shemona Esrei. And you come into shul and they're holding Shema. You have to say Shema with them because it's very important. This is a very important thing. Shema is one of those things that you can't show as if you're not agreeing to it. By being silent, it maybe gives off the impression that you're not acknowledging Hashem as king. So although you've read Tefillah, now you're reading it, it's considered as if you learned Torah.
And what about I've been at Shabbos meals where in the middle of the meal, they'll stop eating and they'll repeat they'll say Krias Shema. So women don't need to do that also, right?
That's not usually in a minyan setting. The reason they'd be doing that would be in the summer when they take Shabbos in early, and
they daven too early
to say the Shema. So when it comes night where it's time for Shema, they would say the Shema. How you do that, we'll learn about that. But let's say that's happening while you're in your meal. First of all, to join them is a mitzvah. I mean, I wouldn't say that you should say, well, it's a woman. A woman also is supposed to say the Shema. So I think that would be, if you're sitting at the table and you have no reason not to join, you should join.
Okay, thanks.
So too, if you are psukim b'makim shirash lapsik. This even applies if you're, let's say, ahead of the chazan, or so whatever. You're in places in the davening where you could make an interruption, and the minyan is saying the Shema. So then, even then, also you say the Shema. But if you're holding in a place that you can't interrupt, we said before that you just cover your eyes. You say the word Shema, depending on where you're holding. What happens if you haven't said the Shema yet and you're ahead of you're with the minyan? You're not with the minyan. But let's say you haven't yet said Shema, and you plan on davening and saying Shema. If you're going to say Shema with a minyan, so you're saying Shema out of its time because you're not holding Shema yet. So you'd still say Shema even though you didn't say it yet, but have intention that this shouldn't be the Shema for your prayer, for your obligation. So you say the Shema properly with the blessings before the Shema and the Baruch Shamar, etc., and the two blessings before Shema. He says this is not just only to Shema. This applies. This is Ashrei. I haven't seen people do, but he says this includes Ashrei. Aleinu, people join Aleinu even if you're not in the minyan. Even other things you say with the minyan. The point is, don't separate yourself from the congregation. We're going to do the last footnote before we finish the class, and then we'll just open up to a question or two. Piyutim are special hymns that are said in some congregations during the festivals. You should not don't just sit there and be quiet if you're not part of a minyan. The question really is, and we have to get to that, we'll get to that another time. What do you do if you're davening in a minyan that says things that you don't say? It's not your nusach. For instance, in Chabad, we don't say V'shamru on Friday night. I daven in a minyan that does say V'shamru. So is it inappropriate to be quiet if you don't say V'shamru when the community is saying V'shamru? Should you join them or not? So we'll get to that at another time to discuss those things as well. Any questions before we complete the class? All right, everyone. Shavua Tov, Lala Tov. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank
Good
you.
Tov, Rabbi. Thank you.
Photo.